Welcome to the Dog Trainers Podcast,
a podcast created by dog trainers, for dog trainers, and anyone who's ever fallen in love with man's best friend.
So the next thing that we have to take a look at is our technical teaching, right? So how is your technical teaching? Now, I define technical teaching as being able to pay attention to the minute things that are going to change the owner's overall outcome, right? Their body language, their posture, their hand positioning, things like the tone, the amount of repetitions of a command, like all these little tiny things really make a huge difference when you start like diving into them. And my skills in technical teaching got better and better. Actually, the more I actually taught staff members how to teach. Right. And so I think every dog trainer, it's really difficult to get good at technical teaching unless you are, for me, I was able to teach people how to work with dogs and train dogs without the pressure of, I only have an hour to do it, without the pressure of, they're paying me for this. So like I got to teach staff members and I got to teach assistants, and it was literally my job. I got paid to make sure people were good at stuff. Right. And so that allowed me to approach something one way. All right, that didn't work, or it worked, but I want to see if I could approach it from a different angle. And so one of the big things that I would always do is I would take a concept and I try and figure out 4 to 5 different ways of approaching that same problem. Maybe even with the same person, right? But what tends to happen is, teaching, like, for example, I used to run daycare, and we used to teach people in a daycare how to control, a group of 30 dogs without having to touch them. Right. Maybe a slip lead here and there. Right. Mm-hmm. But, it was a task. And we were one of the only daycares in Los Angeles that could actually ask all the dogs to lay down within 30 seconds. And we could be able to get all the dogs in a timeout. And Mariano actually used to work at that kennel with me. So he definitely knows about it. Mm-hmm. But one of the cool things about technical teaching, it's the little things that make all the difference. Right. And a lot of little things is what changes the 50% of what I used to say, and what raises the potency of what it is that I'm teaching, right? And it's really cool. It's really cool because it allows the owners or the clients that we're working with to get better faster, even though it might seem that we're not progressing that quickly, right? So I remember when I was a younger trainer, I would feel so focused on like trying to get the result. And to me, I thought, well, it's as simple as, just grab the leash, pop it, and move forward and ask the dog to do it again, right? Well, if the dog doesn't do it right once, get him to do it 3 more times until he gets it right? And it was very hit the nail on the head. If there's a problem, just whack it down kind of thing, right? And what I realized, the more patient I became, the more technical of a trainer I became, the more attentive to the process of training that I became, the better results I was getting. Mm-hmm. And the happier clients were, because I was not putting unreasonable pressure on them, and therefore there was not unreasonable pressure on the dog.
Right. And an interesting point to that. So you're talking about you've had this mindset shift from I just need to get this done to I'm going to kind of learn to really feel out the actual process of it. Mm-hmm. And I find that fascinating because I don't disagree with you, but in a weird way, I kind of do. Mm-hmm. Because I too, as I've gotten better as a dog trainer, learned to love the very minute aspects of training. Mm-hmm. Even like hand placement when trying to get a dog to lay down with food, right? Mm-hmm. This versus that. It's interesting to see when you have wherewithal to pay attention. Again, instead of like a white belt dog trainer just kind of just going through it, hoping it works. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's interesting to see, well, if I turn my hand this way, the dog reacts in that way. And I'm like, oh, that's fun. Right. And you can be it's almost conversational with the dog in the moment. Mm-hmm. The reason why I somewhat disagree, which we don't really disagree, is just because I'm a competitive person by nature, and I still tend to look at things as I still want to achieve my objective, only now my objective is different. It's not get this dog to heal at all costs now. Now it's how do I get this dog to absolutely love engaging with me? How do I get this dog to really want, and I mean like innately want in and of themselves, to work for you and with you instead of like avoiding corrections, so to speak, right? And I agree with you too that because we're working in a more efficient manner, naturally the dogs perform better, which even just the dog performing better in and of themselves takes pressure off the client too, because I'm sure everybody here knows what I mean when I say sometimes you can send a dog home that just looks badass, and it alleviates a lot of stress off the owner because the dog kind of flatters the owner. Like the dog's better than them, you know.
Yeah, it kind of walks them through it.
Exactly, right. As they get better, you know. Because there's always that like lull, especially with like a board and train situation, because the owners have to catch up. So that is something that I found has made my training and my clients happier, because the dogs look better, they're more focused, and they want to be more focused, which means that they're more attentive over time, like as they get tired and stuff like that. You know, they don't become combative. And so the owners feel better about working the dogs longer so that they get to work longer, and it's just the steamroll heading in the right direction.
Yeah, totally. And one big thing that we've put into place here at my company is, as we talked about in the last episode of season 1, doing pre-go home follow-ups, right? Like every week, clients will come here and work with their dogs. And that's served as such an amazing opportunity for some of my newer trainers to work on their technical teaching skills, right? They don't have the pressure of the dog having to be flawless. They don't have the pressure of the dog. They just have to teach the owner what the dog had learned that week, right? And they get to go into dense material, like teaching, like, well, this is how we did this, and this is where we put our hands, and pretty much they just have to teach the owner to do what we've done with that dog for the last 7 days, right? And so it's really cool, and it's been going on for a month or two, and it's really awesome to just see my team get better, and they explain things, and I hear them say something from across the room to a client, and I'm like, that was dope, you know?
Right.
So to just kind of see them bloom and blossom, because it's starting to connect, right? Like the logic, the making it feel right, and the technical skill, all that stuff is connecting for them.
Absolutely. And I'll tell you what I've noticed because I've been doing the same thing, is I think just before we had Mike on, I was doing this thing to where I would have the owners come in just one time the week before the dog goes home. If it's a 3-week program, they'd come in at week 2. If it was 4-week, they'd come in at week 3. Since then, though, I've been doing the same thing, having them come in weekly when they can, because sometimes they're out of town, you know, because it's summer.
Yeah, true.
But when they can, I try to get them in weekly. And what I've noticed lately that's very helpful in terms of kind of improving technical teaching is I'm able to there's a different way that I feel like clients learn and really, really digest this information when they feel it working in real time. Meaning, you know, last week I had a client come in and they were working their dog with food work because it was the dog's first week here. Just the other day they came in, and this is now week 2, we were working leash work. And it was really fascinating that when you can scaffold things the way that makes sense to us as trainers, you can see the client's wheels turning, and kind of like assistant trainers. Same thing, because the dog ain't going home yet. So the owners don't have this pressure of like, I've got to do this right either, because they leave, right?
Yep.
So they just have to
and they
focus.
know there's more work to be done. Yeah.
Exactly. They just have to focus for 1 hour, and then you can go away, right? So, I was working sits and downs with this dog, just a brief rundown. The dog's a year-old golden doodle and is very sweet, of course, and playful and everything, but he's bitten mom twice. And it was over stuff. Like, one was over a pool toy he didn't want to give up. You know, he growls at her when she tries to kick him off the couch. There's just no boundary there. And so I told her from the beginning, the goal then is going to be, I need to teach you how to set boundaries with him. I need to teach you how to adjust your relationship with him, how to become a better leader for him. And with that, he'll trust you, he'll respect you, he'll stop pushing you, he'll stop trying to nip you, and yada, 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 right? But I also explained to her, the process is going to look something like this. Before I do any of that, I've still got to teach him everything. I've still got to, like sports, I've got to show him what the jump shot is before I start judging the jump shot, right? So we went through food work, and she completely understood, this is how dogs learn. Don't worry about all the other stuff right now. Don't worry about boundary setting, all that right now. Just do this. Sit, boom, down, boom, 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 boom. And understand while you do it, this is why dogs correlate what you said with your hand moving. And she goes, oh, okay. And it's a very lighthearted, simple message. Next week, now that she's had a week to ruminate on the food work, I go, I'm happy to see you guys. Let me show you how this becomes that. And we start working with leash work. And I start explaining to her, this is how you're going to start setting boundaries. With very light leash pressure, you're going to guide him into sit, good, down, good. And then you're going to clap your hands and try to, you know, like, don't call him, but see if you can't get him to move out of his down. When he does, you're going to go no and use your leash to put him back. And she goes, and she goes through a few repetitions, and you can kind of see in their face, like, they're just making sure they get it right. But then a few reps in, they're like, oh, I think I see what's happening. I think I see why this is, And of course she claps again, and the dog thinks about moving, but this time doesn't actually move. And she goes, oh. And then I can explain to her the real benefit of this. And I say, are you ready for this? And she goes, yeah. I go ahead and release your dog and reward him. She goes, break, boom, play, play, play. And I told her, what if I were to tell you, not only does us doing leash work right now express to the dog that you can make him wait until you release him, therefore reinforcing that idea of dominant, who's in charge, right? You control space and privileges, access to mom. But also, what if I were to tell you that the conversation that you're having with your dog, a little secret conversation that most people don't seem to know about, is mom's love is not unconditional. Mom gives access because she released and rewarded the dog. Mom gives access in terms of playtime and just closeness to dogs who behave and dogs who listen. Because if he didn't listen, he broke the command a couple times in the beginning. She put him right back. If you try to break commands and come to me, there's nothing for you when you get here. And when I explained that to her, just like that, then you could see this like, oh, I get it. So this is how this is going to turn into this and this. And then I gave them a brief rundown before they left. I'm like, okay, guys, next week, like, like as in this coming week with your dog, I'm going to be turning this into that. And I'll see you next week and we'll go from there. So just that's a little example of how like you can explain things to owners in a way that's not so stressful for them because they don't really have to worry about it other than just the lesson.
Yeah, and I think that's really important because like what popped in my head when I was hearing you speak was kind of talking about like actions speak louder than words, right? And how is it that you convince the dog of this complex idea, like only good dogs get affection and blah 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 blah. It's because your body language is explaining that to the dog, right? When I block the dog, I'm telling him you can't come over here, right? When I put the dog back, I'm saying you weren't welcomed, so I put you back, right? Like there's all these other technical things from the body language to the timing of this to the marking of that, like that it is a lot. It's a fucking lot for a dog owner to learn, and so that's why I love just breaking it down and scaffolding it with the owner 1 week at a time if it's possible, right? But right now during summertime, everyone got their COVID vaccine and they're fucking leaving. So
I know
we have a lot of teaching to do when they come back because they're not going to be able to come every single week. So, well, super excited about that.
Yeah, man.
So I want to move on to the next section, right? We were talking about how's your troubleshooting, right? What's one of the big issues that you see with as we get better as dog trainers? What are some of the things that we get sorry, let me rephrase this. When we were younger dog trainers, our troubleshooting wasn't as good as it is now. Right. And what would you say is some of those, how would our troubleshooting get better as a dog trainer?
My single biggest complaint in troubleshooting, almost in dog training, because I'm sure you and I are in the same boat. We retrain a lot of other trained dogs often, right? My single biggest complaint, I've done blog posts about it. You and I have done other content on it. Misdiagnosing the problem. I get so many dogs. In fact, my latest employee, my assistant Lincoln, his dog, Artie, I get so many dogs that come to me with this whole host of issues on top of whatever the original issues were. Because the person that they were training with before thought that it was something else, so they were working towards something else. So now not only did you solve this problem, but you've made the dog worse in some other way. And the very quick example is, so I have an employee who has a dog named Artie. And Artie is his service animal because my employee's in a wheelchair. And Artie is, he looks to me like a golden Australian Shepherd mix, like really fluffy, giant golden, very excitable, very sweet, and he's pretty solid with his obedience. Now the problem is, his obedience is great with food and toys. Like he's very drivey. Imagine that, right? But because he's drivey, he jumps and he pulls and he barks and he this and he that. He's a drivey dog.
Right.
My client, or my assistant is in a wheelchair. He can't quite. How do you control that, right? So of course, the natural step for him was like, okay, I'm gonna do some e-collar work with him because I can press a button. I can do this, right? So he sends him out to do a board and train with someone. I don't know the name of this person. And the dog comes back worse than they were, and anxious in the crate when they weren't before, and afraid of the e-collar when they weren't before. And, you know, they send me the dog after like weeks, by the way, of talking back and forth and like making sure that I'm the right fit. Because of course now they're nervous about training their dog with e-collar or like sending it to a board and train.
Right.
But once I finally kind of got them on board and I got the dog in, you know, when I started e-collar with him, I called him and I was like, listen, I think I know what went wrong, you know? And I was like, listen, I don't know this other trainer. Like, I'm not judging them. I don't know who they are. I don't care. But a couple things, and you'd be amazed what a difference this can make. Artie is a fluffy dog. And I was like, so first things first, I got him some proper contact points. I can only...
They were cranking up too high.
Exactly. You know? And also, I think they were correcting things that shouldn't have been corrected, which
Of
means...
course.
And that's a misdiagnosis. You're correcting something that's not correctable, which of course means the dog's going to be worse because now you're stressing them out, which then the trainer misdiagnoses as this dog is being brattier, so let me correct more and more and more. And I think that's what it was. It was just this whole host of like stressing this dog out. Whereas I took a different approach based on what I saw, and he got a lot better. He went home better. It was what they were looking for. They were happy enough that Lincoln wanted to work with me. I'll put it that way, right? So that was just my latest example, but people misdiagnose their problems all the time, and so they work for the wrong thing, and then the dog suffers, and it's just this whole issue.
Yes, 100%. And I would say some of the misdiagnoses that I've grown from as a younger dog trainer was, you know, I grew up right when dominance theory was like really big, right? Like I loved Cesar Millan as a kid, and you know, I think one of the big thing was the difference between dominance and fear, right? And how, you know, kind of diagnosing that a dog is just dominant and trying to control the situation all the time. And don't get me wrong, I've met a handful of dogs that straight up want to control their environment left and right, right? But however, a dog who is acting out or a dog who's aggressive or a dog who's baring teeth doesn't necessarily always mean that the dog is... Most of the time, that dog is fearful, not necessarily dominant, right? You know, generally speaking, when the dog is trying to control the environment, it's usually because he doesn't want the environment to control it because it's scared, right? And so that was a big misdiagnosis that used to happen a lot when I was a younger dog trainer. And so kind of coming to that realization was super huge because it allowed us to change the approach, right? Another one that was interesting is confusing misunderstanding of something with the dog challenging you. And this is something that's huge in compulsion training, right? So like if my dog didn't do something, most likely because he was out of focus, right? That's what I find out later as a trainer. But I looked at it like, that motherfucker, he purposely smelled the ground because he wants to teach me a lesson. And right. And so you approach it from a place of anger. You approach it from a place of, you know,
like
egotistical emotion and revenge, right? You approach it from this place. And this type of misdiagnosing of a dog's intention or a improper reading of the dog's behavior, you know, it just leads to a lot of bad dog training, right? And guilty of it for sure. And I'm so glad I got out of it and I was able to learn and educate myself. And you know, there's a lot of misdiagnosing of what is possible and what is not possible in dog training.
Absolutely.
Right. As a trainer, at some point, a trainer feels, you know, I'm ready for the challenge. I'm going to try and I think I can fix all of them, you know?
Right.
I think I can help all of them, right? Because we're so excited and stoked. And, you know, as you get as more dogs you train, you start realizing your limits. You start realizing the limits of at least what you can do. And I think what we're going to talk about in the next section is kind of, you know, how we learn a little bit more. But with that being said, let's go ahead and break for another commercial, my friend. Hey guys, it's Brent with the Dog Trainers Podcast. Now, did you guys know that if you leave us a review, it's easier for people to find us on their podcast platforms? So please go ahead and leave us a review on whatever podcast platform you're on. We'd really appreciate it. And now let's get back to the show.